This is the Lancia 037, a fragile and elegant Group B car built by Italians to compete in the World Rally Championship. In 1983, this sports car helped Lancia win the title in the Manufacturers' Championship, but in 1985, it was the first to herald the troubles of Group B. At the French rally Tour de Corse, the Lancia of Italian driver Attilio Bottega slid off the road into a ditch and hit a tree. Unfortunately, the roll cage could not withstand the impact, leaving the driver with no chance of survival. A year later, Lancia returned with the new all-wheel drive Delta S4, which was built to replace the outdated 037 model. The Delta S4 had a 4-cylinder engine producing almost 600 horsepower with a negligible weight of 950 kilograms. Although the car slightly resembled the production Lancia Delta hatchback, it was a purely racing, mid-engine prototype unrelated to the road-going Lancias. With Finn-Henri Toivonen behind the wheel, this car had every chance to bring the title back to Lancia, which had gone to Audi and then to Peugeot in previous years. However, on the second day of the rally, on May 2nd, 1986, the Delta S4 left the road and rolled down a rocky hill and got stuck in trees where it caught fire. Due to the car's design, Henri Toivonen and co-driver Sergio Cresto were literally sitting on the fuel tank. As a result of the crash, they burned to death before they could escape the car. This was the last straw. The fast and dangerous Group B was almost instantly banned. Many fans and drivers at the time believed it would destroy the World Rally Championship. After all, since the early 1970s, cars had only been getting faster and faster, gradually distancing themselves from their production versions. However, starting in 1987, fast Group B cars had to make way for slower and almost production-like vehicles. This meant no more mid-engine layouts, carbon fiber bodies, huge wings, or other engineering madness. But the task that lay before the engineers didn't become any easier because of this. In fact, they had almost half a year to create, test, and build new Group A cars, which were much more closely tied to production vehicles in terms of design. All they needed was to find such a production car, something Lancia had excelled at in the past. I'm not sure if most of you even know whether the Lancia brand still exists, but it used to make very interesting cars. Take for example the Lancia Fulvia HF, which marked the beginning of the most interesting events in the brand's rally history. Initially it was a relatively modest coupe with a 1.1-liter engine, but thanks to the small HF Squadra Corse department led by Cesare Fiorio, it was transformed into a real rally weapon by the standards of those times, of course. It had 4 cylinders, 1.6 liters, and 113 horsepower. The Fulvia was very successful in rally up until the early 1970s. By the way, it also gave birth to the legendary Stratos, as the first prototype was built on Fulvia's components. And even the HF badge, which originates from the Lancia Hi-Fi or High Fidelity Passionate Owners Association, originally appeared on the Fulvia and became a very recognizable symbol. Gianni Lancia, the son of the brand's founder, proposed an elephant as the emblem of the brand's sports division, reasoning that an elephant doesn't accelerate very quickly, but once it does, nobody can stop it. But if in the 1960s, a nearly stock car with just over 100 horsepower was sufficient for winning at the highest level in rally, by the end of the 1980s, this was, to put it mildly, no longer enough. Unfortunately, none of their road-going Lancia models at that time resembled a car on which a successful rally car could be based. Well, almost none. The production Lancia Delta was something like the Italian version of the Volkswagen Golf. It was an angular front-wheel drive hatchback with a base engine of 75 horsepower. The Delta first appeared in 1979 and by '86 was already starting to feel outdated. However, the Italians didn't give up on trying to breathe new life into it. As early as 1982, they introduced a concept for an all-wheel drive and more powerful Delta, and in '86 they showcased its production version called the Lancia Delta HF 4-wheel drive. This happened just a month before the tragedy in Corsica, which led to the ban on Group B. So the engineers at the Abarth factory where racing Lancias were built already had something to work with. I would even say they were unbelievably lucky. Small size, lightweight, hatchback body, all-wheel drive, and 3 differentials, one in the front, one in the rear, and one central. This was the concept on which the most successful rally car, which would win the Constructors' Championship 6 times in a row, was built. But most importantly, this car set the standard for what a Group A rally car should be like, as almost no one understood this until the beginning of 1987. Audi tried out the Audi 200 sedan, which was not only huge but also heavy and weak. Ford went even further with experiments by fielding two versions of the Sierra. One was powerful and rear-wheel drive, while the other had all-wheel drive but a less powerful engine. The Japanese Mazda were all-wheel drive and compact, but they also lacked power, and the championship-winning Peugeot left rally altogether. Lancia, however, showed that the ideal rally car was a compact all-wheel drive hatchback with a turbo engine producing around 300 horsepower. At least the officials who wrote the rules aimed to limit the power to this level. However, there were initial problems with engine power. The engineers managed to extract only about 250 horsepower from the aging Fiat twin-cam engine, and the drivers, who were used to 600 horsepower Group B cars, were slightly shocked.
50. And I feeling I have no engine. I say all the time, what I doing here? 2 weeks ago I have in 600 and 950 kilo. Now I have in 250, 270 horsepower, and maybe our weight is something 1,200 kilo. That's like in day and night.
Initially, Lancia planned to produce only 1,000 all-wheel drive Delta HFs per year, but to homologate a rally car, as is well known, they needed to build 5,000 units. Therefore, the Italians had to drastically ramp up production rates, but even so, they still couldn't manage to release 5,000 cars by the beginning of 1987, when the first Monte Carlo rally was set to take place. But as often happened in the past, Lancia's managers, particularly the aforementioned Cesare Fiorio, once again found use for their innate negotiation skills. The Italians managed to convince the sporting officials that they had enough parts to assemble the missing cars. Just some day later, the Italians were saved by the fact that their competitors were even less prepared for the season. So already at the 1987 Monte Carlo rally, Lancia's domination was simply overwhelming. Miki Biasian and Juha Kankkunen took the top 2 places. That year, Lancia missed victory only 3 times. In the Swedish rally, Mazda was faster. In Kenya, it was Audi, and in the French Corsica, it was the BMW M3. The M3 was another outstanding car of the 80s, but due to its rear-wheel drive, it could challenge Lancia only on asphalt. By the end of the year, the Italians easily became champions in the team standings, and Juha Kankkunen became the driver's world champion. But at Lancia, they understood that such an advantage was not a result of Delta's perfection, but rather the poor preparation of their competitors. Sooner or later, their competitors would catch up with and surpass Lancia, which meant that the disadvantages of the car needed to be addressed quickly. Besides low engine power, there were plenty of them. A major problem was cooling and tight wheel arches, which limited the size of the wheels and suspension travel. So by the second year of competition in 1988, Abarth built a new version, Lancia Delta Integrale. It received wider wheel arches that could accommodate 16-inch wheels and more powerful brakes, larger suspension travel, a 6-speed gearbox instead of a 5-speed, better cooling, and improved handling. Over time, the 8-valve 250 horsepower engine was replaced by a 16-valve engine rumored to produce almost 400 horsepower by the end of its career. Group A cars were faster on some tracks than Group B cars they replaced. Over 5 years, Miki Biasian and Juha Kankkunen each won 2 championship titles, and the Delta and Martini Racing livery became a symbol of a successful rally car. By the way, there was an amusing story related to the famous car livery that happened at the 1989 Rally Sanremo. To celebrate the debut of the new 16-valve Delta, Lancia and Martini introduced a new red version of the livery. However, after just one rally, they stopped using it. It turned out that red cars did not look cool and did not contrast enough on the front pages of Italian sports newspapers, which were black and white at that time. In 1991, Juha Kankkunen once again became the world champion behind the wheel of the Delta. However, even in its freshest version, the HF Integrale Evoluzione, it still retained limitations imposed by its basic layout from the 1980s. The engine bay was tight, and increasing suspension travel was becoming increasingly difficult. Nevertheless, the modernization of the car continued at full throttle. The differentials were now electronically controlled, assisting drivers in corners. Additionally, variants of the car with a semi-automatic gearbox and 4-wheel steering were tested. However, while the Delta without a clutch pedal did appear on rally tracks, albeit in the colors of the satellite team Jolly Club, the fully steerable chassis remained a prototype. Unfortunately, producing a homologation batch of 5,000 Deltas with all 4 wheels steerable was deemed entirely impractical. The car in its previous form was still capable of winning, but at the end of 1991, thunder roared amidst clear skies as Lancia announced its withdrawal from the World Rally Championship starting from the next season. Unfortunately, Fiat, which owned Lancia, decided to promote in motorsports its other brand, Alfa Romeo. However, the battle-ready Deltas continued to compete in the World Championship, now sporting the Martini racing livery fielded by the satellite team Jolly Club. It seemed that formally nothing had changed. The cars were still built and maintained by the same Abarth team. However, almost all key engineers who had previously worked on Delta's development were reassigned to a new project, building the Alfa Romeo 155 touring car for the DTM Championship. Additionally, by the early 1990s, Fiat was increasingly struggling with financial difficulties, slowing down the continuous development of the car. On the other hand, hungry Japanese manufacturers were investing more and more money in rallying. They all had relatively independent racing departments in Europe, allowing them to progress quickly and build very successful Group A cars. In 1992, Toyota rolled out the new Celica GT4 onto rally tracks, with the fast Carlos Sainz Sr. behind the wheel. For the Delta, it was time for the final battle and the ultimate update, Delta HF Integrale Evoluzione. The car received 17-inch wheels, once again widened track, and most importantly, a rear spoiler. The 1992 season began with Lancia's victory at the Monte Carlo Rally. Behind the wheel was former ambulance driver Didier Auriol, who had been driving for Lancia since his '89 but was known as an asphalt rally specialist. However, this season Auriol found new courage and drove flawlessly almost everywhere. His victories in Monaco, France, Greece, Argentina, Finland, and Australia were so overwhelming that it seemed like the Delta had reserves to dominate for the next 6 years. However, in the fall, Fiat announced the end of support for Jolly Club, and Didier Auriol revealed his contract with Toyota. From that moment, his seemingly flawless season began to falter. A wheel came off at the Rally Sanremo, there was an engine failure at the Wales Rally, and ultimately he lost the title to Sainz. It could be said that the Delta was a living creature with a southern Italian character that knew how to retaliate. Nevertheless, the points earned by all Lancia drivers were enough to secure the 6th and final team championship title. This victory was achieved in a battle against a more modern car that went on to win the next 2 world championships and reigned until the era of Subaru and Mitsubishi. As for road versions, the second evolution of the Integrale was produced until 1994. At the Maggiora factory where the Integrale was assembled, a prototype of the third evolution model was even built, but it did not go into production. Today, Lancia's lineup consists of only one car, the city hatchback Ypsilon. It seems that with its exit from sports, Lancia began to lose some important vitality, and the coming years may be the last for this brand. Or maybe not.